Cupola. This is for all my tacticos, guys. I'm going to go from a different perspective. Yesterday's game, Real Madrid against Manchester City. My sole focus today will be on Real Madrid. Won't really be looking at Manchester City or their players positionally, but I want to focus on what Real Madrid did to win the game yesterday. I've got my tactics board out. I'm going to look at it from a completely different perspective. That's what you can see. I just have one half of the field and see what Arbeloa and his team really worked on in order to get the best out of the players they had yesterday, minus Bellingham, minus Mbappe, and minus Rodrigo in the attacking phase of play. I want to highly focus on with the ball and without the ball. Rest defense was very key yesterday in winning the game against Manchester City and limiting the uses of the half spaces from the Manchester City players. Now, ideally, this is just from what you can see on the board, the average positions that these players picked up in this game. And it's so key to see how Real Madrid both attacked and defended. And this is something very important, especially when it comes to your IQ, football IQ. I like delving into the tactics, the minute details, you know, the things that were so meticulous that actually produced the victory in its entirety. When you're watching the game, there's so many things that you don't see. But however, when you're actually at the stadium or when you're actually looking at the tactical output of the teams or of the team that you're watching, you can see the slight differences, the slight adjustments that have made a difference in order to lead Real Madrid to victory. Now, before I move anybody on this board, these are the average positions that were picked up. Now, first of all, I want to say on this pitch, yesterday, the best player for me, for all of these players on this pitch, was of course Federico Valverde. Mendy was absolutely solid, did not get beaten by his man. Like I said, you don't see Mendy do this too much, and that's not necessary. It's absolutely not necessary because they normally have Vinicius Jr. operating on that side. So that's one of the main things that you always see here with Ferland Mendy. Trent, on the other hand, does get forward a lot. However, because Jeremy Doku was playing on this side, you didn't see Trent do too much of going forward. These two were absolutely solid. Now, Dean Huijsen, definitely his best performance for Real Madrid. I think Rudiger basically walked him through that whole game. But another thing is, he wasn't exposed as much in terms of the spaces in behind him. Now, Dean Huijsen, as good of a defender that he is, he's not the fastest, most mobile defender. Now, most of the things were played in front of him. I must say that's also because partly due to how Manchester City play when they play the passes, the side to side, recycling the ball with Rodri in the midfield, with Bernardo Silva, you know how Man City tend to play a lot of the time. It really allowed these four to set in. One thing I liked about these four is Trent was here a lot, Rudiger tight in there, Mendy tight in there. Close to that 18-yard area, also limiting the spaces that Manchester City could exploit here, forcing Man City to actually go wide because you're not trying to play in these half spaces, which Manchester City love doing. Another thing is Aurelien Tchouameni, as we know, he loves to patrol right in here, almost like a third centre-back when they're not in possession, always picking up the late runners in midfield. Now, the two players here, oftentimes, it wasn't like this when they didn't have possession. You see Arda Güler just come just around here or sometimes cover Mendy. Mendy could do that job. You see Tchouameni just line himself up here, and Thiago Pitarch, as we know, alongside Tchouameni in that role, and then you see Valverde come back here. So they had that two banks of four a lot of the time. Brahim Diaz normally picking up, you know, Rodri or whoever picked up the ball in these places. Sometimes you see Brahim Diaz cover in this place, and sometimes you see Aurelien Tchouameni go over and they produce a five. But most of the time, it was those two banks of four. And in the first 20 minutes, you saw a lot of the time, Thiago Pitarch was having problems in that midfield, covering the gaps and the spaces. And that's where Man City were having more of the ball and Doku was getting a lot of the ball. But then Real Madrid changed that. They dropped about 5-10 yards deeper so they could see the ball in front of them, of course. And then you had Valverde also tracking back with Trent Alexander-Arnold. Listen to this. Valverde defensive job was one of the best that you'll see from a midfielder covering his fullback. Now, yes, he operated a lot in that right channel. He didn't really play as much centrally, but the main thing was, don't allow Jeremy Doku 1v1 with Trent. And Valverde, sometimes you see him cover on the outside, you could see him cover on the inside, made a block tackle, as well as Doku went past Trent. Valverde was there to block the ball. Defensively, the defensive shape of Madrid, as you see Arde, you had in Tchouaméni, Thiago Pitache, and then you had Brahim Diaz sometimes cover here, Brahim Diaz sometimes go over there, and Valverde, they produced a 3, which Real Madrid were fantastic at, but it didn't really matter. What I want to focus is on this right here. As you can see, the 18-yard box is there. Real Madrid made it so compact so that Manchester City didn't find the spaces in between these lines, which Manchester City so often do. We saw this repeated by Michael Carrick and Manchester United. The 2 banks of 4 is the most important thing. You absolutely limit the distances between each player, and Real Madrid did that to a T. But apart from that, the absolute pressing from Thiago Pitache in that midfield and Valverde from minute 1 is what set the precedent for this game. And Real Madrid, Arbeloa included, Tchouaméni included, Brahim Diaz included, Valverde included, they absolutely pressed Manchester City. It was like a pressing machine, especially in that first half, and I loved it. 2 players, 3 players, they fought for each other. They knew what they couldn't make up for individual quality, they will make up as a team performance. That is the Santiago Bernabeu. That is a stadium that when you step into, like Mark Gay said, you look around, the stadium ceiling, roof closes on top of you. The noise is absolutely deafening, and you see white t-shirt absolutely sprinting at you, pressing you, not allowing you to play. And that is one of the key reasons why Real Madrid won yesterday in a defensive sense. Rest defense, superb, mid-block, press when they needed to, but they worked as a unit. This unit moved up, this unit moved down. Now I want to focus a bit more on the attacking side, on what Real Madrid actually did. Now, a lot of the time in possession, you'll see Brahim Diaz go there sometimes. You'll see Vinicius Jr. play that role from there into there, and then sometimes smart runs. We saw it with a pass. Courtois over the top, Valverde was right there. One touch, bang, he's one-on-one, scored the first goal. Now for the second goal, we saw this exact formation, and this is what I showed you. Brahim Diaz was there, Vinicius Jr. here, and Valverde making that run into here with the goal. Of course, we seen him make the run across O'Reilly and took a touch with the left foot, finished, but Valverde made a run from out to in across the pitch, and Vinicius Jr. found him again. That was very smart from the front three, and that's what I loved about Madrid. The interchangeability between the front three made them as flexible as possible. Vinicius Jr. had the freedom to roam wherever he wanted, but we know where he wanted, that inside left channel. And oftentimes, because Real Madrid lined up like that, it allowed Arbeloa to also find positions in here. Did he influence the game enough? No. I think Arbeloa, again, recycles the ball way too much. Always tries to come back, tries to keep possession. I don't know if it's an Alonso thing, but I need to see him take more risk. He did that when Vinicius Jr. won the penalty with that pass over the top. And what did we see again? We saw Vinicius Jr., instead of Vinicius Jr. being here, Vinicius Jr. was on the last line. He made that run in behind there, and he was 1v1, and that was the difference. Vinicius Jr. has played that role against Man City quite a few times for Real Madrid, so it wasn't new to him. I think, again, with Real Madrid's attacking, they always had these two, Thiago and Tchouaméni, in that midfield. Regardless of what Arbeloa did, he was allowed to drift in. Valverde out wide, he was allowed to drift in. Brahim Diaz, again, patrolling these areas there. He was allowed to do that. We didn't really see Brahim Diaz, on the wing too much. We saw Valverde oftentimes pick up that position. A few times, yes, you have Thiago who joined the attack, but apart from that, Real Madrid were quite solid with that line. But the key man in attack was Vinicius Jr. because he was always going to occupy the last line of Manchester City's defense. Now, Manchester City made a tactical change. They thought, you know what, let's bring on Kusanov because he's fast. didn't really make a difference to Real Madrid's game, sorry. In the end, after Valverde's hat-trick, Real Madrid didn't need to express themselves too much. They didn't need to come out and play too much. What they needed to do was kind of condense the game, slow down the game, and wait for an opportunity, which they found with Vinicius Jr., a penalty, which he should have scored. Again, the technique, I'm not really sure about. Will it be costly? That is a big question. I'm yet to know if that miss from Vinicius Jr. will be costly. Something gives me the feeling that that Manchester City will score at the Etihad, and they will score more than one, and they will score the first goal. And this is where Real Madrid have to come into play. Will they be able to keep a clean sheet there? I'm not really sure. However, Vinicius Jr. is waiting for his teammates. He needs Bellingham back. He needs Kylian Mbappe back. And it's going to be a very tough one. Do they line up the same? I think that if they have those players fit, they will line up very similarly. Again, Thiago's playing because there's a lot of injuries in that area. Vinicius Jr., like I said before the game, and I spoke about the tactics, I spoke about how he's going to have a key part to play in yesterday's game, and he had that because he was the only attacker that will cause more issues in behind here. And that's why I thought, Arbeloa, you absolute genius. The pace of Valverde was used, and oftentimes it isn't used in behind. Most of the times it's used in front of the opposition, whereas this time Arbeloa had Valverde really pushed up to the last line. And with the two first goals, you saw that Nico O'Reilly was not able to pick him up. Also, it was a shock to the system to see Valverde that high, to see Valverde trying to get into the box. For the third goal, we saw him run into the box, a late run. For the second goal, we seen him make that run, an early run into the box, but it was a diagonal run and it was smart. So he had these two, the pace in behind that caused Manchester City problems. And like I said before the game, you will always cause Man City problems because they play a high line. If you have that pace and you're willing to take risks, which Real Madrid were, and then the rest of the team did what they needed to do when Real Madrid lost the ball, and I think they were absolutely superb. They deserve their credit, and tactically, Arbeloa outsmarted Pep Guardiola. Now that is something that we didn't expect. However, Real Madrid 3-0 up in the first leg. Let's see what happens at the Etihad. Cupola, make sure you subscribe for more tactical analysis. The tacticals, you get it. I know you want the breakdown. You got it right there. And I'll see you soon.